Hello, everyone, and welcome to RBCM at Home. My name is Kim Goff, and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. And I'm coming to you today from my home, which is located on the territories of the Lekwungen people in Victoria, British Columbia. I'd like to invite you to take a moment wherever you are today to think about the traditional territory where you are and the First Peoples of your area. RBCM at Home started last March when our museum and archive closed due to the pandemic. It was an opportunity to talk to staff about what they were working on from home. Now, even though the museum has reopened, we've continued this program as a way of staying connected with people at home or school around the province. This program and previous ones have been recorded, and you can find them on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. February is Black History Month. Understanding and celebrating Black history helps us all to see how the past connects with our lives today and how it has inspired movements for change. Today, my guest is Fran Morrison. Fran is a director with BC Black History Awareness Society. She has been on the board since 2010, and her roles include giving presentations like this one's today, as well as being the board secretary, content and research manager for the website, and a project manager. Welcome, Fran.
Thank you. Very nice to be here today.
Great. Well, I'd like to begin by asking you to share a little bit of your own history, Fran.
Oh, well, thanks very much. I'm originally from Nova Scotia. My ancestors arrived in Nova Scotia after the American War of Independence. They are known as Black Loyalists, and they were all documented in the Carleton Papers, and that's more commonly known as the Book of Negroes. And so I see my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Sam Brothers, age 25, with his wife, Betsy, and 2 children. My paternal ancestors came to Nova Scotia from Maryland via the Underground Railroad.
Wow. We have some visitors watching us from out east as well, so there's some connections there. One visitor here, Lisa, is watching in Hamilton, and she said, Black history is our history. Black people have helped make Canada the country it is today. Very well said, Lisa. Thanks for sharing that. Now, Brian, I'm going to invite you to share your screen. I know you have a presentation for us.
Yes, I do. Okay.
That's great. Robin is saying she grew up 40 minutes from Birchtown, and it's important to raise awareness of history. That's neat. All right, Fran, over to you.
Okay. Let's just see if I can get started here. Oops, sorry. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you a little bit, just very briefly, about the BC Black History Awareness Society, and then I'm going to talk mostly about the pioneers, and then also some information about places of interest here in BC. So our society had its beginnings in the mid-70s as the Victoria Black People Society. Their desire was to bring together people who not only had an interest in BC's Black history, but they were also looking for a community. The stimulus for the society came in 1993 when a number of people from our community were, the Royal BC Museum asked us to bring together and organize and co-host a Black History Month event. That event was really successful, and that prompted that committee to apply for society status. Our primary focus is education, and we do that through our website, presentations, information programs like this one, as well as through cultural and artistic events. We host events throughout the year, but certainly Black History Month is a focus for us. So these are some of the events we have this year. You missed the one on Sunday, it was fabulous, but you can still pre-register for our event on February 17th, where we're bringing together Canadian and American scholars to discuss their research. February 20th, it's going to be lots of fun to learn all about hip hop. The 21st, we have an online tour with the Ross Bay Cemetery. There are more than 50 Black pioneers buried there. And we're closing out our month with a really fabulous musical performance, looking back with Pablo Cardenas at that fabulous Oscar Peterson. And you can live stream that from Humans Jazz Club.
Great. Those are all online, Fran, so everyone can join?
Yes, they're all online.
Awesome.
Okay, let's get to the main event, the pioneers. The information you will be hearing today is based on this catalog, a catalog of information and sources of information pertaining to Black people in BC. It has 11 chapters, 230 pages, and it's a publication that we published. And I understand that at the time it was all typed on a Smith Corona. It references 65 books, 30 newspapers, as well as archival documents, genealogy records, letters, manuscripts, recordings, and images. This catalog is now available on our website. Today, I'm here as a narrator to share some of the information from some of these chapters. Throughout today, I will be referring to geographical areas, mostly as they are known today, while also recognizing that these territories remain unceded. Looking back at the US, slavery in colonial America was established as a legal institution in each of the 13 colonies dating back to the 16th century. But by 1858, free states and territories outnumbered the slave states by just a little. California had become a free state in 1850, but there were still laws, legislation in place that inhibited justice and equality for Black people in California. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, it effectively extended the reach of the institution of slavery into free states, and that also meant more freedom seekers were taking refuge in Canada. On March 6, 1857, the Dred Scott decision is handed down by the US Supreme Court. It effectively said that the US Constitution was not meant to include American citizenship for Black people, regardless of whether they were enslaved or free, and the rights and privileges that the Constitution confers upon American citizens would not apply to them. In the British colony, in what we know as the British Empire, there were laws to limit slavery passed in 1793, and the idea was to prevent the further introduction of slaves and to limit the term of forced servitude. And then the Slavery Abolition Act for the British Empire was enacted on August 1st, 1834. And this also continued to spur on anti-slavery and abolitionist movements in the United States. In 1851, the Anti-Slavery of Society started in Ontario, and they wanted to promote the global abolition of slavery. So all of these things would have been contributing factors for an estimated 30 to 40,000 to cross the border from the then United States to Canada via the Underground Railroad. So in 1858, migration to Canada was not a new idea, but the conditions for migration to BC were different. The United States and Britain signed the Treaty of Oregon on June 15, 1846, establishing the 49th parallel as the border. And if you've looked at a map of the island, you will understand that any territory south of the Ladysmith is below the 49th parallel. With the Fraser Gold Rush, Douglas, who was the governor at the time, had the foresight to insist that all the businesses related to mining claims had to be done in Victoria. But Victoria, well, it had been a capital since 1852, but it was pretty much a backwater. The white population were largely farmers and Hudson's Bay clerks. He needed viable businesses and he needed revenue. Douglas needed settlers to cement Victoria as a British administrative business and mining hub to thwart any attempts by the Americans to reassert territorial authority. So the pioneers that arrived in 1858, they were invited to settle here by Governor James Douglas. Now, the Black community, specifically in the San Francisco area, were well organized. There were always discussions about how they could overcome the business, labor, human, and legal injustices they faced daily. These discussions included the possibility of leaving the United States. Not only was there the recent Dred Scott decision that barred citizenship, but active before the California courts at this time was the case of Archie Lee, accused of being a fugitive slave who was to be returned to the Mississippi. As this case unfolded, it confirmed for the Black community in San Francisco that there were no guarantees of freedom when you traveled from state to state. And so beginning in January of 1858, Archie Lee was arrested, freed, and then arrested again as various attorneys, state and federal lawmakers rendered and defended their decisions based on ambiguous and disparate slave laws, property laws, and state laws. But on April 14, 1858, a final trial in California held that Lee had crossed no state lines with the intention of escaping. Lee was declared a free man. And that evening at the church, the community was celebrating Lee's release. In the midst of these celebrations, Jeremiah Nagel was a captain of the steamship Commodore, which sailed regularly between San Francisco and Victoria, and was certainly well known to Douglas, arrived at their meeting. The meeting was reported in the San Francisco paper, the Daily Evening Bulletin, the next day. Nagel had come to the meeting with maps and information about Vancouver Island, and a letter that could only have come from Douglas, described as a gentleman in the service of the Hudson's Bay Company of undoubted veracity. It didn't take long for the church members to decide they needed to find out a lot more about this invitation and the situation in this British colony. So on April 20th, a 35-member committee sailed to Vancouver Island on the steamship Commodore. They arrived in Victoria on April 25th, 1858. A delegation of 3 met with Douglas: Fortune Richard, Wellington Moses, and a Mr. Mercer. And here is something from Wellington Moses: to describe the beauty of the country, my pen cannot do it. I consider Victoria to be one of the most garden spots of the world. The climate is most beautiful, although, well, it's pretty nice out today. So over the next several months, Blacks began settling in the colony. And these were the conditions of settlement that they understood: that they could purchase land in the colony. And by the way, $5 an acre at that time was considered outrageous. After 9 months residence, become landholders, right to vote and sit on juries, have the right to all the protection of the law, and could, by signing an oath of allegiance, eventually become British subjects. So the catalog has a lot of information about legal and social issues. So yes, Blacks did commit crimes, were charged, arrested, sometimes fined or jailed. And in one of the documents, as Pilton has said, their criminal record was no worse than that of the white population, and that cases involving Black people were not excessive in number. Many were minor in nature, and we've documented 23 cases from 1858 to 1871. But I also want to touch on the conditions of settlement, specifically with respect to human rights issues. Yes, there was issues around access to drinking establishments, access to theaters, and probably the one that received the most press was the Negro Corner. These settlers did not intend to establish their own church. They were welcomed by Reverend Edward Cridge to join his church, and on Salt Spring Island and in rural Saanich, everyone worshiped together. However, in Victoria, at the Congregational Church, Reverend McPhee said he was following the wishes of his parishioners to establish a Negro Corner. Another congregational minister, Reverend Clark, disagreed. The ministers started airing their differences in the local press, and that's when the Colonial Missionary Society, whose headquarters were in England, stepped in 1861, passing a resolution of freedom of access secured to every part of the building for all persons without distinction of color. The catalog continues to document instances of discrimination and racism through to 1978. Some of these issues include refusing accommodation in hotels, refusing accommodation to students, false arrests, and threats to residents, and the practice of segregation at the Crystal Pool in Vancouver from 1941 to 1945, which only permitted the use of the pool by non-whites on Tuesday mornings. And if we jump ahead to 2015, in the report from the United Nations with respect to the decade for persons of African descent, a UN working group visited Canada in 2016 and published a report the following year. The 16-page report includes an historical overview, demographics, and 41 recommendations. And in its conclusion, it says, despite Canada's reputation for promoting multiculturalism and diversity, and the positive measures taken by the national and provincial governments, the working group is deeply concerned about the structural racism that lies at the core of many Canadian institutions and the systemic anti-Black racism that continues to have a negative impact on the human rights situation of African Canadians. This plaque is installed at the Central Saanich United Church, formerly known as the Shady Creek Church, which was built by Black pioneers. The creation and placement of this plaque was largely the work of our society through the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada. The plaque was unveiled on February 20th, 2000. Now, national historic events are defining actions, episodes, movements, or experiences in Canadian history. When this was designated, there were about 300 designations in Canada, less than 30 in all of British Columbia. The plaque reads, in 1858, nearly 800 free Blacks left the oppressive racial conditions of San Francisco for a new life on Vancouver Island. Governor James Douglas had invited them here as promising settlers. Though faced with intense discrimination, these pioneers enriched the political, religious, and economic life of the colony. And so I'm going to tell you about some of these great pioneers. The federal government report supporting the designation is more than 50 pages, with over 130 references to historical materials, documents, research, maps, and images. And they've concluded Black migrants became embedded in economic and political life, and they had an impact disproportionate to their numbers. In spite of widespread racial discrimination, several Blacks assumed positions of prominence that allowed them to challenge the status quo and to affect the province's settlement patterns, commerce, and trade. And that their experiences form part of a broad canvas of settlement in Canada. While many of these settlers lived in the Greater Victoria area and on Salt Spring Island, some did go directly to the gold fields. For those that went to the gold fields, it was in some cases to earn enough money to be able to return to the United States to purchase freedom for family members. Others were also part of the road construction crew that built the road from Harrison Lake to Lillooet, known as the Harrison River Valley Road. We know of 4 settlers who arrived with post-secondary education, having graduated from Oberlin College in Ohio. Oberlin was the first college in America to adopt a policy to admit Black students in 1835, and if you can imagine it, the first to grant bachelor's degrees to women in co-educational programs. So 3 brothers who came, John Craven, William Allen, and Elias Toussaint, were all graduates of Oberlin College, and Maria Alexander, who later married Mifflin Gibbs, also attended, and William Harrison, who is listed in the Oberlin archives as being from Vancouver Island, graduated in 1879. With respect to property ownership, in February 1859, the British colonists published a letter from Reverend Moore. He had been the clergy of the San Francisco Church, and the article says, "We have a report that these pioneers have purchased thousands of dollars worth of real estate on this land, on this island. And real estate records tell us these settlers purchased property within the boundaries of the areas that today is known as Victoria and Saanich. Others purchased or preempted farmland, including on Salt Spring Island." In the Victoria City Real Estate Assessment Roll for the year commencing July 1st, 1864, Peter Lester is listed as owning 9 properties, in addition to his Vancouver Street residence. Jean Varman is the author of The West Beyond the West, A History of British Columbia. The 3rd edition was published in 2007, and in chapter 3, she says, she refers to Victoria's Black community as several hundred, largely middle-class men and women. Information about pioneer women is really hard to locate. Even books written about women or by women often neglect women from minority groups. Plus, we found that often women are identified by their husband's name, like Mrs. Robert Smith. But in addition to being solely responsible for raising the children, they did farm labor, contributed to the economics of the household as cooks, hairdressers, dressmakers, laundress, midwives, teachers, as well as undertaking community church and social work. Sherry Edmonds Flett, an historian, writes, the majority were under the age of 35 years. Many were single, emigrating with their families. Most were in their late 30s or early 40s. Only 4 women were 50 years of age or older. And so let's just take a look at a brief cross-section. Mary Barneswell and Victoria Richards, both single and then married after arriving here. Nancy Alexander with her husband Charles, and that was the family that was instrumental in building the church. They had 8 more children after arriving on a very prosperous farm. Sylvia Stark, it was 3 generations that came to Victoria. Sylvia with her parents, Howard and Hannah Estes, her husband Louis, and their 2 children, Emma, age 3, and baby Willis. Now, for those of you who live on Vancouver Island, you probably know Island View Beach. The Mitchell farm is there. Maybe you've visited their farm market or been amazed at the number of pumpkins in their fields in October. That farm was owned by Howard Estes. In 1867, Howard, following the death of Hannah, who is buried here in Victoria, sold the farm to Thomas Mitchell, along with livestock and farm equipment. For Sylvia, her story has become legendary. She lived to be 106. This photo was taken in 1933 when she was 96. The photographer, J. Wesley Miller, tells us she had an apron on and was actually hoeing corn in the garden when I arrived. She wanted the photo to be taken with her apron on, saying, I want them to know I am a working woman. And below that is her daughter, Emma Stark. Again, 3 when she arrived with her parents and grandparents. She went on to become the first Black teacher on Vancouver Island, teaching in the Cedar District near Nanaimo. Nancy Lester arrived with her husband and 2 children who were teenagers. Their daughter, Sarah, taught piano lessons from her home. Maria Gibbs attended Oberlin College, then taught school in Philadelphia for 3 years. She married Mifflin Gibbs in 1859 and moved to Victoria, and they had all of their 5 children here. Crawford Killian, who is a noted author here, says, given her years at Oberlin College, Maria Gibbs was doubtless the best educated woman in Gold Rush, British Columbia. Anne Pierre, born in Norfolk and then moved here with her family. This is her daughter, Corinthia Elizabeth Sarah Ann. She was born in Victoria, and she married Thomas Alexander, who is the son of Charles and Nancy. As I mentioned, the women were very active in charity work, and this is a letter that they wrote to Hannibal Hamlin, the then Vice President of the United States. Now, these women maintained contact with family and friends who would certainly be affected by conditions in the United States and were knowledgeable of what was happening in the US. They raised money through direct donations from friends and family and social events such as donation parties and bazaars. Now, during the American Civil War, Blacks were encouraged to enlist in the United States colored troops. They were known as the contrabands. And this is what this donation was for. And they've said, and though many miles divide us from those who have the burden to bear this in this great struggle for human liberty, our hearts are with you unto death. Based on tax assessments year over year, 15 to 30 businesses employing an estimated 150 as clerks, shop workers, servers, laborers, etc. They typically rented business space, but owned their homes. So this proliferation of ads The first ads were as early as July 1858, and all the businesses advertised at least weekly in all the newspapers, the Gazette, the Chronicle, the Times, and all the variations of the British colonists. So Nathan Pointer owned and operated a men's clothing store where he sold what he called gentlemen's furnishings. His inventory included shirts from London, New York, and Philadelphia, umbrellas, cashmere comforters, and opera scarves. Sam Ringo's restaurant and hotel. The restaurant was on Yates Street, gaining the reputation as the best in town, and they also offered a catering service. One event was the St. Andrews Society anniversary dinner with 80 guests, including James Douglas. The tickets were $5. Joshua Howard was the first lawyer to advertise his services in a newspaper, and he also offered legal aid. Paris Carter, general agent, collector of rents and debts, and he was also most commonly known as a real estate agent. John Dunlop, who ran this livery stable, introduced the first horse-drawn taxi service to Victoria. And here we have William Delaney Moses. He had a barbershop here in Victoria and then established a business in Barkerville. Now, Francis Partridge, who was a printer for the Times Colonist, and then later for the King's Printer, which we know today as the Queen's Printer, he arrived in Victoria in 1862. And in an article in the Victoria Daily Times in 1943, he's being interviewed. And he says, "I sometimes wonder if today's citizens realize their early contributions in laying the foundations for business and industry in Victoria. These early colored citizens of Victoria were cultured, well-to-do, and good businessmen." So just taking a look back at the population in 1858, as I said, the non-Indigenous, largely transient, less than 500, and about 1,000 on the entire island. And even if we look forward to 2016, in terms of the Black population here in Victoria, it's still relatively small. And if we look across Ontario, it has the largest population, Nova Scotia, the longest history, the Prairies is the fastest growing, BC is growing, but at a slower rate. But the good news is we're all younger compared to Canada overall. I can just take a moment now to look back at the pioneers, how we commemorate, celebrate, and remember them. We are part of BC's landscape. Alexander Park, Dees Island, Giscombe Portage Trail, Henry Houston Scott Park in Surrey, McDane Creek and McClure Mountain in northern BC, Stark's Crossing near Nanaimo, Stark's Road on Salt Spring Island are all named after Black pioneers. There are plaques commemorating the Black pioneers as a collective and individuals such as Mifflin Gibbs, Emma Stark, John and Charlotte Dandridge. And then going forward to the 19th and 20th century, the Joe Fortis Memorial Fountain, Harry Jerome, Emery Barnes Park, John Braithwaite Community Center, Barbara Howard Plaza, and Pullman Porter Street. And the amazing projects that the Hogan's Alley or Side Eater are doing to develop land and operate assets as a community trust. One other project is this Fort Victoria Brick Project it was the Greater Victoria Civic Archives Society, which sought to commemorate early Victoria settlers by outlining the boundaries of the original Fort Victoria with a double row of bricks, each engraved with the name of a pioneer. And there are names of Black pioneers on these bricks: Nathan and Sarah Pointer, Louis and Sylvia Stark, Howard and Hannah Estes, Ringo's Restaurant, Wellington Moses, the Barneswells, the Alexanders, and so on. Mifflin Wistar Gibbs, he was the de facto leader of the Black community that was here. And in 2009, he was designated a person of national historic significance. His accomplishments are absolutely remarkable, so I'm just going to read them to you. Abolitionist and agitator toured with Frederick Douglass, and active for the Underground Railroad in Philadelphia. Business owner and newspaper publisher in San Francisco. This business here, Lester and Gibbs, was considered a competitor of the Hudson's Bay Company. He led the project to build BC's first railway in the Queen Charlotte Islands. He was a Victoria City Councillor, 1867, 1868, 1869, and chair of the Finance Committee and acting mayor. He was member of the Yale Convention that framed the terms of BC's entry into Confederation. And then, if that wasn't enough, when he returned to the States, he then earned a degree in law and opened a law firm, founder and president of the Capital City Savings Bank in Arkansas. He then became America's first elected Black judge in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then US consul in Madagascar. And I guess he still had lots of energy because he published his autobiography, Shadow and Light, in 1902. Mifflin Gibbs died July 11th, 1915 in Little Rock, Arkansas. So I hope today that I've piqued your interest in these Black pioneers. And if you want to know more about them, this is an exhibit that we just launched in December, 20 stories, 9 videos, 86 images and archival documents. And the amazing thing about this, which makes it very Canadian, is that it's all bilingual. And that's really important because we know that here in Canada, 28% of Black Canadian households speak French at home. Then you can find this exhibit at communitystories.ca. So again, just in terms of our reference material, the catalog that is online, we're always grateful to the archives that help us with images and archival documents. The Old Cemetery Society, which is here, which gives us lots of support. Of course, their personal collections from families such as the Alexander family and Stark family. And if you want to know more from an American history or an African American history perspective, blackpast.org is a great resource as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. We'll get you to stop sharing your screen there. There's lots of things coming up here. Tillicum Elementary has been watching, so they say thank you very much. Gwen Hill says it's so interesting. Dana, who's doing a school project, says this is going to be so helpful. She's really excited about that. I got super excited with the slide about women. As you said, it's so unusual for women's names to be there. Let alone photographs and to know anything about them. Now, I did notice the woman in the top corner, Barnsworth, was very elegantly dressed, like yes, beautifully dressed. Can you tell me any more about her?
She was married to Barnswell, and he was a carpenter. And it said that he built some of the most elegant homes in Victoria, and that apparently he was also a personal carpenter of James Douglas.
Wow. Yeah, her outfit told me there was something about there. There's some success going on, but also I love what was it Estes or Mrs. Stark? Was she
Sylvia Stark?
Sylvia Stark. That she's wearing her apron because she wanted to know she was a working woman. I love that. It makes me think of my grandma, and I just want to give her a hug. I love that. So thank you very, very much for sharing. There's a couple questions here in the Q&A. That I want to go to. Cecily is asking, do you think the reliance on plaques over other kinds of either memorials or statues makes it easier for BC's Black history to remain hidden? It's a really interesting question. Other than plaques, Fran, and you've got some place names as examples, what do you think about that? Do you think there's other ways to share?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Oh, she was talking about the reliance we have on plaques to share history.
Oh, yes.
Does that help for that history to remain hidden? You know, people walk past those plaques perhaps, or don't see it. Is there maybe some more something that's more visual or larger or more in your face, harder to ignore?
Yeah, so well, certainly a lot of the things that we do are online. But the other part is that you need to be in person, you need to be present. And that's part of what our society tries to do. In the last decade, we've had over 100 events. And so it's about that face-to-face connection, which has certainly been harder during this year. And I think the other part is in some ways, it's a struggle to work with the Ministry of Education to ensure that that history is in our history books as well.
Yes, that would be great to have more in our history.
We do have a couple of interesting projects coming up from an art perspective with local galleries to do some work. And of course, the exhibit that's coming up that we're working on with the Royal BC Museum and Archives, which will be in the Pocket Gallery at the museum. That's opening in the summer. So that's going to be exciting as well.
Yeah, and that's a free access space. Everyone can come to it and see it. And when it's up, we'll definitely have some more presentations. Sherry is wondering, do you know why Mifflin Gibbs left Canada and went back to Arkansas?
Mifflin Gibbs described the government at the time as unfit for intelligent community. So that was part of it.
The government here.
He was pretty harsh. Yes, exactly. He was pretty harsh. But the other thing is you need to think about what was going on in the United States at the time. I mean, it was at the end of the Civil War. And I think there was this sense that things were changing. There was the idea that, there were Blacks that were being elected. Men were going to be getting the right to vote. And I still think the main draw has got to be family. They did leave mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters. And the idea of being able to be with your family and still be able to live a life that is fulfilling for you has got to be part of that draw as well.
Absolutely. Both Gordon and Lori, who are here on Zoom, are wondering, are there still descendants of the pioneers you described here in Victoria today?
Yeah, the Alexander family, there are about 100 and so descendants still living here. And as well, the Stark family as well. And I'm sure there are others, but those are the two that the families that I'm most familiar with. And in fact, the Alexander family, she may be familiar. If you play baseball, you would be familiar with the Hudland family.
Excellent. Well, before we sign off, there's a request. Can you repeat some of those February dates that you have coming up?
Oh, sure. February 17th is the symposium. February 20th is the hip hop event. February 21st is the cemetery tour. And February 26th is the concert with Pablo Cardenas.
Great. And
it's all on our website,
which is bcblackhistory.ca.
Awareness Society, yes.
And James is wondering, can you tell us a little bit about membership information or how people join the Black History Awareness Society?
We have, again, you can join our membership. We have a youth membership that is only $5 for a year. There's a membership that's $20 for people that are individuals. And then there's a family membership as well. But again, yeah, and they're annual memberships.
Thank you. And if folks can stay on, maybe we can take a few more questions after we finish our recording here and stop our live stream. But of course, I want to say thank you. If you joined us, thank you, Fran.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And for everyone who joined us, thank you for taking some time today, this month in particular, to think about BC or to think about Black history. This is so important. If you joined us late or you missed something or you're writing a school report and you want to go back, this has been recorded and you will find it on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. So please have a look there. It should be up in the next couple of days or so. And our museum, the Royal BC Museum, has reopened and we are ready to welcome you back. And you can find out more on our website about time, tickets, and exhibit. We will be continuing at home kids, and at outside for the foreseeable future. And links for all of those programs are on the website. Next week, January 16th, I will be speaking with guests from Northern BC about the Grand Duke Slide of 1964. So there was a big avalanche, and we'll be talking about the impact it had on that area and the people of that region. So I hope you will join us. Until then, take care of yourselves and one another.